You're listening to the Otis Jiry channel.
The Star by H.G. Wells, performed by Otis Jiry. It was on the first day of the new year that the announcement was made, almost simultaneously from 3 observatories, that the motion of Neptune, outermost of all the planets that wheel about the sun, had become very erratic. Ogilvy had already called attention to a suspected retardation in its velocity in December. Such news scarcely interested a world the greater portion of whose inhabitants were unaware of the existence of the planet Neptune, nor outside the astronomical profession did the subsequent discovery of a faint remote speck of light in the region of the perturbed planet cause much excitement. Scientists, however, found these events remarkable enough even before it became known that the new body was rapidly growing larger and brighter, that its motion was quite different from the orderly progress of the planets, and that the deflection of Neptune and its satellite was becoming now of an unprecedented kind. Few people without training in science can realize the huge isolation of the solar system. The sun, with its specks of planets, its dust of planetoids, and its impalpable comets, swims in a vacant immensity that almost defeats imagination. Beyond the orbit of Neptune there is space, vacant so far as human observation has penetrated, without warmth or light or sound, blank emptiness, for 20 million times a million miles. That is the smallest estimate of the distance to the very nearest stars, and, saving a few comets more substantial than the thinnest flame, no matter had ever to human knowledge crossed this gulf of space, until early in the 20th century this strange wanderer appeared. A vast mass of matter it was, bulky, heavy, rushing without warning out of the black mystery of the sky into the radiance of the sun. By the second day it was clearly visible to any decent instrument as a speck with a barely measurable diameter in the constellation Leo near Regulus. Soon an opera glass could attain it. On the third day of the new year, the newspaper readers of 2 hemispheres became aware for the first time of the real importance of this unusual apparition in the heavens. A planetary collision. One London newspaper headed the news, and proclaimed Duchesne's opinion that this strange new planet would probably collide with Neptune. Lead writers enlarged on the topic, so that in most of the capitals of the world on January 3rd, there was an expectation, however vague, of some imminent phenomenon in the sky, and as night followed sunset around the globe, thousands of men turned their eyes skyward to see the old familiar stars just as they had always been. Until it was dawn in London, and Pollux setting, and the stars overhead grown pale. The winter's dawn it was, a sickly filtering accumulation of daylight, and the light of gas and candles shone yellow in the windows where people were astir. But yawning policemen saw the thing. Busy crowds in the markets stopped agape. Workmen rushing to work, milkmen, drivers, homeless wanderers, and in the country, laborers trudging afield, poachers slinking home. All over the dusky, quickening country it could be seen, and out at sea by seamen watching for the day, a great white star comes suddenly into the western sky. Brighter it was than any star in our skies, brighter than the evening star at its brightest. An hour after daybreak it still glowed out white and large, no mere twinkling spot of light, but a small, round, clear, shining disk. And where science has not reached, men stared and feared, telling one another of war and pestilence, foreshadowed by those fiery signs in the heavens. Sturdy Boers, dusky Hottentots, Gold Coast Negroes, Frenchmen, Spaniards, Portuguese, stood in the warmth of the sunrise, watching, the setting of this strange new star. In 100 observatories there has been suppressed excitement, rising almost to shouting pitch, as the two remote bodies had rushed together, and a hurrying to and fro to gather photographic apparatus and spectroscope to record this novel, astonishing sight, the destruction of a world. For it was a world, a sister planet of our Earth, far greater than Earth indeed, that had so suddenly flashed into flaming death. Neptune had been struck squarely by the strange planet from outer space, and the heat of the concussion had turned two solid globes into one vast incandescent mass. Around the world that day, 2 hours before dawn, went the pallid great white star, fading only as it sank westward and the sun mounted above it. Everywhere men marveled at it, but of all those who saw it, none could have marveled more than those sailors, habitual stargazers, who, far away at sea, had heard nothing of its advent, and saw it now rise like a pygmy moon and climb zenithward and hang overhead and sink westward with the passing of the night. And when next it rose over Europe, everywhere were crowds of watchers on hilly slopes, on rooftops, in open spaces, staring eastward for the rising of the great new star. It rose with a white glow in front of it, like the glare of a white fire, and those who had seen it come into existence the night before cried out at the sight. "It's larger," they cried. "It's brighter." And indeed, a moon a quarter full and sinking in the west was at its apparent size beyond comparison, but scarcely in all its breadth had it as much brightness now as the little circle of the strange new star. "It is brighter," cried people clustering in the streets, but in dim observatories astronomers held their breath and peered at one another. "It's nearer," they said, "nearer." And voice after voice repeated, "It is nearer." And the clicking telegraph took that up, and it trembled along telephone wires, and in 1,000 cities grimy compositors fingered the type. It is nearer. Men writing in offices, struck with a strange realization, flung down their pens. Men talking in 1,000 places suddenly came up with a grotesque possibility in those words. It is nearer. It hurried along wakening streets. It was shouted down the frost-stilled ways of quiet villages. Men who had read these things from the throbbing tape stood in yellow-lit doorways shouting the news to passers-by. It is nearer. Pretty women, flushed and glittering, heard the news told jestingly between dances and feigned intelligent interest. Nearer, indeed, how curious. How very, very clever people must be to find out things like that. Lonely tramps, faring through the wintry night, murmured those words to comfort themselves, looking skyward. It should be nearer, for the night's as cold as charity. Don't see much warmth from it, if it is nearer, all the same. "What is a new star to me?" cried the weeping woman kneeling beside her dead. The schoolboy, rising early for his examination, puzzled it out for himself, with the great white star shining broad and bright through the frost flowers of his window. "Centrifugal, centripetal," he said, with his chin on his fist. "Stop a planet in its flight, rob it of its centrifugal force. What then? Centripetal has it, and down it falls into the sun. And this? Do we come in the way, I wonder?" The light of the day went the way of its brethren, and with the frosty darkness rose the strange star again. It was now so bright that the waxing moon seemed but a pale yellow ghost of itself, hanging huge in the sunset. In a South African city a great man had married, and the streets were alight to welcome his return with his bride. "Even the skies have illuminated," said the flatterer. Under Capricorn, 2 Negro lovers, daring the wild beasts and evil spirits for love of one another, crouched together in a canebrake where the fireflies hovered. "That is our star," they whispered, and felt strangely comforted by the sweet brilliance of its light. The master mathematician sat in his private room and pushed the papers from him. His calculations were already finished. In a small white vial there remained still a little of the drug that had kept him awake and active for 4 long nights. Each day, serene, explicit, patient as ever, he had given his lecture to his students, and then returned at once to this momentous calculation. His face was grave, a little drawn, and hectic from his drugged activity. For some time he seemed lost in thought. Then he went to the window, and the blind went up with a click. Halfway up the sky, over the clustering roofs, chimneys, and steeples of the city, hung the star. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen to this story in its entirety. If you enjoy what you hear and what I do and would like to support me and my efforts, visit my Patreon page at patreon.com/Otis Jiry. If you haven't yet, please hit the like button and subscribe today, and share this video with everyone on your social media. It helps more than you could ever imagine. Again, thank you for listening and have a great day. God bless you.